I'm just putting this at the front of the video I've made about 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri, because I wanted to warn everybody there are spoilers in there. So, but I also want to tell you that knowing what's going to happen in the film doesn't spoil the film. It's that good, I could watch it again. Well, see what's coming next. Hello. Well, this video is not going to be about the brilliance of the film 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. It's not going to be about how good the actors were. It's not going to be about how wonderful the writer is, and it's not going to be about elements of Irish humour, which I've noticed through many other programmes and shows written by Irish people living in England. There's a special sort of humour in that. All the way back to Oscar Wilde, actually, but there are many writing for television now, and they all have a very similar bleak, dark humour. I suppose it's something to do with bogs and Catholicism. Anyway, I'm not going to be talking about that, and I wanted to. The reason I'm not going to be talking about that is I enjoyed the film so much, I made the mistake of looking for some critiques of it in the press. And what I found was more depressing than any Irish humour could possibly have conjured up. And we'll start with The Guardian. This article was written by somebody called Eva Squire. It starts off with this headline: 3 billboards portrayal of dwarfism is reductive and ableist. Just for your information. Now, I have no idea what reductive means. And English is my principal living. Ableist, I've got an idea what it means, but it doesn't mean much. All right. The next bit. 3 billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri is nothing if not a divisive film. Now, I seem to remember that word turning up in the Wilfrid Laurier business. That's what they were calling, weren't they using the word divisive? I seem to think so. Anyway, these words have currency with certain mentalities. This is nothing if not a divisive film, even as it is being heralded as an Oscar heavyweight and an uproarious delight. It is. And oh dear, I can see there's a lot of reflection off my glasses there. Sorry, but I've got to leave the screen lit so I can read this stuff. It's an uproarious delight. It really is an uproarious delight. I actually laughed out loud. She says, it is being criticised by whom? By whom? Just by you, Miss Thingy. Oh dear, your name's gone again. Squire. Yeah, it's only being criticised by you, Squire. For the way it pushes its audience's sympathies towards a racist monster cop who is never held to account for his brutalisation of black Americans. Yeah, he brutalises black Americans. He brutalises everyone. The one time you see him brutalising somebody, it's a white man. What do you mean? Sympathy. He's just a brute. And he's a very funny brute as well. And the thing about this film is that everybody in the whole film, everybody's damaged. There are 1 or 2 who aren't, and they're the ones with the least lines. But in every major character, there is some deep damage. They're all like that, every single one of them. That's the point of the film, dearie. Okay. And then, of course, to give herself some gravitas, Miss Squire has to bring in the graduate student Reference. I did this when I was writing term papers. You don't do this when you're writing a film critique for a newspaper. That's a pure sign of immaturity. In her essay, Illness as Metaphor, Susan Sontag argues, and this makes everything right. Of course it bloody doesn't. You're an idiot. Use your own thoughts, Squire. Right, then here we go. But for me, the film was uncomfortable for a different reason. As a 21-year-old woman with a form of dwarfism, aha, so she's got it, she can talk about it. Does that mean because she's a 21-year-old woman, and an immature one at that, with a form of dwarfism, that trumps everything anyone would have to say about it? This gives her more of an opinion about that film? I think not, Miss Squire. Okay, so as a 21-year-old woman with a form of dwarfism, what stood out was 3 Billboards' depiction of suicide and disability. The portrayals of both Peter Dinklage and Woody Harrelson's characters subscribe to the reductive logic that personhood is only valid in the able-bodied. You idiot, you knucklehead. There is nobody able-bodied in that entire bloody film except for 2 characters. One of them, Angela, Mildred's friend, and she's got like 3 lines. And the other is the replacement policeman who comes in after the Woody Harrelson tops himself in the stables. I'm sorry, I'm spoiling this for you, aren't you? I'll put a spoiler warning at the beginning. And that's also because he's got hardly any lines. The rest of them, every single person in that film has a piece of them ripped out. Even this monster cop. His dad died. He's looking after a drunken mother. You know, he's got problems. Not saying that this beating of the advertising man was a reasonable reaction to that, by the way. But what I'm saying is there is no able-bodied person in that entire film, with 1 or 2 very notable exceptions. Can't you see that? You stupid woman. Next thing. Dinklage plays James, who introduces himself as the town midget. That's how a lot of people would. And whose primary function in the film is as the butt of many jokes. No, he isn't. Now she says something. In the cinema where I saw 3 Billboards, the audience cackled whenever James spoke. Is that the scriptwriter's fault, Miss Squire? Just think about that for a minute. The scriptwriter didn't write in the cackles in your audience. You obviously had a very stupid audience, but then you probably run around with a lot of very stupid people by the looks of this critique. Okay. But I was more baffled when the people around me laughed at distinctly unfunny scenes of James playing pool, holding a ladder, or asking Mildred out to dinner. The source of this hilarity seemed to reside in the mere fact that James existed and that he was short. That is not the fault of the film. I have to keep saying this. You nutcase. That's the fault of the people by whom you're surrounded. And you know what? I'll bet you a lot of them were the sort of guardianistas that you were, and they, well, not exactly as you are, obviously, and they felt, well, right, this is what's in my heart. I think it's funny to see a little person trying to be normal, so I'm going to laugh my head off because I can see it in this film. I remember once when I was doing some work with a group of very right-on people, and I disagreed with them. And one of them accused me of being a lesbian. Now, I didn't mind the accusation. It's not accurate, but, you know, what got me was that this guy would have been horrified if anybody in his group had been accused. That is, the word lesbian being used as a form of abuse. But he could throw it at me. He felt he had permission to throw it at me. That's when I knew how dangerous and stupid right-on people are. Okay, so there's how funny that he, with his non-conforming body, oh, goodness me, should have the audacity to present as a desiring subject. What? A desiring subject? Desiring or desirable? The English is... Oh, what a laugh. This clunky reliance on ableist tropes. No, he didn't do the ableist tropes. Your friends did, Miss Squire. Disappointed coming from a film. It didn't come from the film. It came from the people you were sitting next to. You tosser. Yeah, and the sharp cinder black comedy. Absolutely. Okay, now, there was another one. So, yeah, having seen that one in The Guardian, I thought, okay, let's see what the Independent says. Here's The Independent. 3 Billboards is a lazy, problematic film which didn't deserve an Oscar nomination in any way. Right. Let's start with this. Problematic, I know that turned up in the Laurier Inquisition. It's funny how these people all use the same words, isn't it? Now, it didn't deserve an Oscar in any way. What's that meant to mean? In any way what? All right, a story which should be about a woman rapidly becomes a story about a racist policeman's white redemption. And this is what we're saying is award-worthy in 2018. No, it wasn't about a racist policeman's white redemption. It was about everybody getting karma on what they'd done. And the sort of circularity of the karma had nothing to... Oh, really? Now, look, notwithstanding that the script is baggy, no, it isn't. The editing lazy, no, it isn't. And the directing unfocused and arrogant. Arrogant? Words fail me. How can direction be arrogant? It is, in my opinion, an offensive and insensitive piece of storytelling. Yeah, well, that's in your opinion, but you're an idiot. So, when I watched it back in October, I remember squirming in my seat because of how problematic I found it. Same word, you see. He has a very limited vocabulary, this guy. His name is Amru al-Kadhi. I don't know where they pick these people from. Squires and al-Kadhi, both of them. They must have trawled through the bottom of their journalistic barrel to find these guys. Anyway, it's problematic. So it was surprising to suddenly see the film receiving international acclaim. Split infinitive, mate. Suddenly to see. Mildred puts up 3 billboards antagonising the police to act whose feathers are ruffled. What? You don't you don't antagonise anyone to act. You antagonise somebody. And then whose feathers are ruffled? Where does that come in? English, just, you don't have grasp of your own language. Well, I'm assuming it's your own language. We see her who's her? Having to deal with the patriarchal structures. Well, that should, I mean, what can I say? Of the police force, one of whom is a deplorable racist. Oh, God. So there are deplorable racists and maybe non-deplorable racists, rather nice racists, not so nice racists. What do you mean, a deplorable racist? That deplorable came straight out of the Hillary Clinton songbook, didn't it? Because everybody in The Independent and The Guardian reads Hillary Clinton's words, memorises them and spews them out again. Next bit was, why is it that even when telling the stories of women, conflict is centred around the white male struggle? No, It wasn't about Mildred. She sparked things off, but it was about everybody. Everybody had a place in this story. What I find especially galling is that the film is being received as some sort of bastion of socio-political cinema. No, it isn't. Black Panther is being received as a sort of socio-political bastion. This is a funny film. And that's what it is. What the film does is depict the patriarchal issues, systemic, that's a good word, in America, with a lazy paint-by-numbers technique. Listen, mate, the only paint-by-numbers going on here is your writing. It's despicable. Then expect the viewers to respond to it as if it's some masterpiece for global action. Masterpiece for global action. How did the Independent's editor let this one into print? I mean, it's a disgrace to the Independent. And as for Golling, I want to say something. Mr. Al-thingy. Oh, I've forgotten his name. The only thing you find galling is that you will never, ever write as well as the scriptwriter did for that film. You will never produce anything as luminescent, as funny, and as deep, and as straight to the human condition as you would see, as we will all see in that film. That's what you find galling. And then he finishes off with, now, I don't mean to say that straight white men shouldn't navigate these waters. I mean, there weren't waters mentioned before. He's just brought that in. In fact, one of my favourite filmmakers telling the real stories of America, Sean Baker, happens to be a straight white man. Well, some of my best friends are straight white men. You know what? Sean Baker, I'd watch out for what you're doing now, because if you've got the admiration of this guy, you're going wrong somewhere. All right, well, that's my critique of the critics. That's The Guardian and The Independent, two of the supposedly best newspapers produced in the United Kingdom. It makes me ashamed to be British.